Hey Tam, and welcome to Voice Notes from the Organized Homeschool. I'm thrilled to have you on the podcast and to chat with you and learn even more from you than I already do learn from you on social media. And I know that when folks see that you're on here, they're going to be just as excited as I am. When I put the post out of anyone who was interested to join, multiple people tagged you or mentioned you. So I know that they're looking forward to hearing even more from you. But let's get started. And for those who don't know you, can you introduce yourself and share a little bit about you, your experience, your background, your homeschool, your children, whatever you feel comfortable sharing? We'll start there.
Erica, and thank you so much for the opportunity to chat with you on this podcast. First of all, I love the idea of voice notes because I do frequently send notes with some homeschool friends of mine. So I love this concept. Cannot wait to hear what you put together with this. I'm Tam. I am a wife, mom, book nerd, homeschooling my three kids here in Georgia. Been homeschooling a little over 10 years. And what I've probably the reason people were probably tagging me or what have you is because for the past few years on social media, I've been just really focused on building community with other homeschoolers, especially new homeschoolers who are always nervous and excited to get started, and just making sure that people know that they have access to resources and opportunities and all these different elements of homeschooling that have evolved and continue to evolve. It's one of my little passion projects is to constantly keep learning about what's going on in the homeschool community and then share what I'm learning with other people because that's just I know that has made my homeschool experience so much easier. Is just having the knowledge to back you up when you're feeling nervous, when you're not quite sure. So with us getting started with homeschooling, it was most certainly an accident. I didn't mean to. But with my oldest, we were getting ready to move around the same time that she was supposed to be starting kindergarten. And so my husband and I, we sat down, had a talk, and basically said, well, look, we can just homeschool for kindergarten. I had been working in college admissions at the time, so I knew a little bit about homeschooling, not much, but I knew enough to know that we could do it. We could do it for kindergarten, and then for first grade, we'll enroll her in school. Everything will be fine. We'll go back to quote unquote normal. And, long story short, that didn't end up happening. We never quite went back, even though every year was like, oh, we'll go to school next year, next year, next year. But that's really how we got started. And that's what has kind of been how do I say, that's kind of been the thing that's just kept us going, is just that just we'll see what happens. As long as this is a good fit, we'll see how the next year goes. We'll try it for 1 year, that sort of thing.
That is too funny because we moved right before we started homeschooling too. And same thing, my son started kindergarten this past year, and we were moving. We were planning to move, and we were like, do we look for houses in this area that have better schools or in this area that the schools aren't great, but we kind of like the area better? And so we were like, well, we're going to homeschool anyways, so let's just move where we want to move. So somewhat similar, but yeah, we are just finishing our first year and moved like right around the beginning of homeschooling too. And we do, even though we know that the schools aren't great, we know we could figure it out if we decide homeschooling wasn't working. And we're the same thing each year, just like make a decision. Is this what's best for our sons once the baby begins school? For us, and being open and flexible to changing homeschooling if we need to. So I love that so much. Book nerd, I clearly knew this. And I love your new job in the homeschool consignment store. I know that's not the official name, so please share that. But can you share with us towards the end of our conversation, like your one nonfiction recommendation, one fiction recommendation, and one homeschooling recommendation? So everybody has to listen to the end to get that like gem from you. But also, can you tell us like the age of your kids and what it's looked like homeschooling 3 children and staying organized with like 3 different grade levels? Are they at different grade levels? And even now, like fast forward, how are you organizing with working part-time too?
So yeah, of course, my kids are 9, that's my son, 13, daughter, and 15 is my oldest. My kids are all in different grade levels. In fact, one is in elementary, one is in middle school, one is in high school. And I'll tell you, I've always been an organized person. I have to blame that on being raised by a literal drill sergeant and my mom, who was actually the boss in the house. So, and they've always been organized people. So it just rubbed off on me. And it all started with spreadsheets. That's my love language. That's how I was keeping everything organized. And I would, spend a lot of my free time with like figuring out the perfect plan. I have literally dozens of plans, by the way. The plan changes constantly. I like to think it changes seasonally because we have different things going on in different seasons. So, but I really embrace technology. Technology really helps to keep things organized, and especially like the iCal feature on my phone where each subject of my life has a color coded calendar, and when I start to see too many colors on a day, I'm like, whoa, 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 what's going on here? Or obviously it'll tell you when things are overlapping, so that helps to avoid schedule conflicts. And of course, I could not be as organized as I am without my husband. He plays a huge role in making sure we get the things done that we need to get done. So that's the basis of it. And then now that they're older, everybody's reading, writing, and doing math. Homeschooling is so much easier, like once you're over that hump, because now it literally is just me telling them or, collaborating with them really, because I feel like I'm not really in charge with my older two. They select their curriculum, they select the days that they want to work, they tell me the time of day that they think that they'll be at their best to do their schoolwork, and then I just write it down according to the way that they want to do it. I check in with them while they're doing it. If they have questions, they can ask me. And if we need extra help, tutoring, resources, I make sure that we have them. You mentioned my job. So my job, like you said, is at a homeschool consignment shop, which is extremely flexible. It's called Homeschool Potpourri. It's in Beaufort, Georgia. And some days they just all come with me. So that makes it very simple. But on the days that they don't and they have questions, they'll FaceTime me at work, or they'll ask, they'll send me a voice note, funny enough, where they'll text me and just ask me a question. And I'm communicating with them throughout the day if they're not right there in the same room with me. But that's really how we're managing things so far. But I will say it took years to get there. We did not start out that way. My origin story for homeschooling is a little bit rough.
Okay, I love spreadsheets too. Cannot lie. A spreadsheet, a planner, a project management tool, just after my heart. So I totally get it, and I love that you're like, I own it. I've always been organized, and here's why, and here's what I love. So good. I'm sure folks would love a sneak peek into one of your spreadsheets. So just a shameless plug for like a social media post of you sharing your screen, because I would love to see one. But also, thanks for the tip around the calendar. That is so good too. That's something I started when I was a principal, similar of like I would have colors for observations, colors for my work time, and colors for like school tasks, like being in lunch duty and things like that. And similar like reflection moment of like, why are there so much green on this? I'm in classrooms, or I'm not in classrooms enough, that type of thing. So that's a really good tip that a lot of people can take. I will say I literally got goosebumps when you were talking about how your children basically own their learning right now. I know so many people, myself included, have that goal to support their child to be able to take ownership of their learning. And so how did you get there? I know you said it wasn't always like that and there were challenges, and I would love to like have you go back to a moment of challenge at some point in our conversation and share like what it was and how you got over it. But can you start with telling us how you got to the point where your children now own their learning and like deciding their curriculum, deciding when they're going to learn? What did that look like, you know, from in elementary school? I know you still have one who is in elementary school, but what did you do to get them now to be middle school, high schooler and even elementary who were like, I need to FaceTime my mom to ask a question because I'm owning this. Like, I'm just so curious, and I'm just like love it so much that they like are taking, because I'm just thinking about them as adults and how it's just setting them up for real life, right? So can you share some more about how you made that happen?
I knew you were a woman after my own heart because us visual learners, we know there is nothing better than a spreadsheet and a color-coded system of organization. It makes our brains smile. It's like a massage for your brain when things are color-coded and in their proper order. So I knew we were vibing on that. So, okay, getting them to take ownership of their own education, I have to put it down to kind of like hours and hours and hours of conversations explaining to them like this, they're in school for themselves. They're not in school for me. They're not in school to please me or anyone else in their life. It's not about getting an A, it's about understanding what they've learned so they could explain it to someone else. So just lots and lots and lots of like imparting that being the reason behind school. A lot of parents, a lot of us grew up with, you go to school because I said so, and I'm using my little air quotes, like because I said so. You did what the teacher said because the teacher said so. And I think, at least in my case, adults back then didn't really explain things to kids. You just told them to do it and they were supposed to do it, and you were reprimanded if you didn't do it. When we started homeschooling, I definitely had the thought process of we need to do this just because, like because the law says so, because this is what me and your dad did when we were younger. And I realized very early on that that does not work when you are at home with your kids all day, like trying to oscillate between teacher mode and mommy mode. Like those, your kids don't understand that you're being two different people. You might think you're being two different people, but to them, you're the same. And so I really had to embrace just one role, which was their mother. And as their mother, I needed them to understand I always just want the best for you, but I'm not always going to be there to make it happen. So in order for you to make the decisions that you want in life, these are the tools that I think you'll need, but feel free to try and fail and do things in your own way. There's consequences to every action, and sometimes you got to let them fall and scrape their knee. Let's be clear on that. Like I'm not a helicopter or bulldozer parent by any means. I will let the consequences be what they are. And I think that's hard for some mothers, especially, to just to save your kid from everything. Like there had to be some times where I had to let the kids fail a test. I had to let them see the consequence of not studying, let them see the consequence of not caring about schoolwork, because in our house, if you don't get your schoolwork done, you don't get to go to do your extracurriculars. So when they thought the weeks, they let a week go by and they thought they could just kind of piddle around with schoolwork, and then they're looking at me like, hey mom, it's time for Girl Scouts. I'm like, I don't see your work done, so I'm not going to do my role or my job when you haven't done yours. And they recognize that as a consequence. If you don't work, you don't eat, or if you don't work, we don't play. So, I mean, it was just a lot of that over the years too, until they got to the point where they're like, when I just do my schoolwork and put in the effort and ask questions when I need help, I tend to get the results that I want. And they, over time, have just recognized, like, you're right, this is for me. They're not learning, like the A doesn't affect me. I've gotten, the education that I wanted to get. I've gone to the places I've wanted. I've gotten the jobs that I've wanted. They are still trying to get there, and so they have to work towards it. And a lot of it is just sitting down, having a conversation, just asking them, what do you want to do? And sometimes they'll say, I just want to be a famous YouTuber. I just want to be a gamer. Okay, let's talk about that. When you get that brand deal contract, are you going to be able to read it? Because lawyers don't speak in the general vernacular. They use a lot of Latin words and legalese that you're going to have to be able to decipher, or you're going to have to pay someone a bigger percentage of what you're earning to help explain it to you. And then you're going to have to trust that that person is telling you the right information. And I happen to be in a position, on TikTok where I've had a couple contracts sent my way. I let the kids read them. I let my kids read the contracts that I get sent, and we will just go through and I'll ask them straight up to highlight words you don't understand. Let's look those words up and make sure you understand what you're signing. So a lot of life experience happens in those situations. Or I have a child who wants to, be a flight attendant. So I will literally reach out to people I know who are flight attendants and say, tell tell me what kind of skills are needed, and I'll let them explain to my kids like what it took to get there, and what are the minimum education requirements to get there. So those types of things really help to make it to where education isn't just something we as parents are telling them to do because we said so. We're telling them to do it because we love them and we want the best for them. Also, I have to say, getting back to you with the book comment, yes, books are my love language too, like books and spreadsheets. And I'm stressed a little bit about these three that you want me to, you only three, only three. I'm trying so hard to narrow it down. By the end of this podcast, I'll have it. But girl, like, only three. Oh my gosh, I'm going to get there, I promise.
I am cracking up because I knew that asking you for 3 books would be tough. So I'm sorry and I'm excited because I can't wait to hear what you share with us. And I love everything that you shared about how you got there with your children. Like, first and foremost, just the honesty of like, it was just a whole bunch of conversation. And I think that this is me being a teacher, principal, and like having a lot of time with a lot of children. It's like we as adults sometimes can underestimate the amount of times we have to talk to our children about something. And sometimes we can get frustrated because we're like, we said this to you already. Like, what? Why are you still doing this? Or why don't you get it? And let's be honest, even us as adults, we need to hear things multiple times to get it and practice and reflect and like all the stuff you need to do to truly learn something. I just think it's really great that that's like, you know, that about yourself and about how you had to get here, and that you own it and that you did that. Like, you did that. And you're seeing the real life benefits of all the time and conversation you put into the skills that now your children are demonstrating for you. The gem you dropped, like, you're in school for yourself, you're not in school for me. I mean, if anyone walks away with one thing and they start incorporating that into their daily conversations with their children and like use that to fuel the work that they do, like, it just, honestly, that's like so much of learning in general, no matter what, homeschool, private school, public school. It's like, you got to do this for yourself. You have to own it and take accountability and be excited about the learning that you're. And one thing that you're like, what you just shared in the stories that you just told is reminding me of one of the reasons I am absolutely obsessed with homeschooling right now, is that everything you shared, like the being able to sit down and have them look at the contract and highlight the words they don't know and do the research to figure that out. Like, all of this is a product of the fact that homeschooling allows you to have more time to do this type of learning and this type of cultivating a love of learning. Just having been a teacher and a principal, like, I know that not every kid gets that in schools, and they don't have the time to do that with every kid. So like a really quick example, it's not academic, but we were at Chuck E. Cheese one day because I don't know why. I think we finished our learning and I was like, let's just get out of the house. So we went to Chuck E. Cheese and my son came up to me and was like, that little girl in the bounce house called me something and I didn't like that. And I was like, okay, so what are some options of like what you could do to resolve this feeling and to make it better? Like, what are you thinking about? And we talked through it. He gave me some ideas and I'm like, absolutely, why don't you go try that? He comes back and he's like, she wasn't listening to me. She didn't hear. And I said, okay, did you try saying? It's usually like we talked through it, and he was back and forth with me a couple times. And afterwards, I reflected on the fact that in most schools, teachers don't have the time. Like, literally, this was probably like a 15-minute process with one child about one incident. And the number of things that happen in schools, I'm speaking from experience, I know for sure, like, there's not time to have that type of conversation off of a pretty small deal, right? Like, she called him a name, not a huge thing. It wasn't like a physical fight or anything like that, which is happening in schools too. So like, off of small incidents that then gives my son skills to move forward. And like, just recently at the pool, someone was asking him to borrow his goggles, and he really didn't want to let him use his goggles. And he said to the kid, "Yeah, I actually don't think I want to share my goggles with anyone." And I was very proud of him because I honestly, I mean, I don't know if he learned that at Chuck E. Cheese that day, but that was not something he would have done. He's 5. And so, those skills are things you learn of how to talk to people respectfully, respectfully say no to someone in a kind way. And I was proud that he did that. And so I think that like there's just a lot we get to do because we have more time. Like academics doesn't take from 9 to 5 or 9 to 3 or whatever the school day is. It does not take that. And so there's so much time to do like what do they want to learn? What development do they need? How do I make this real world? How do I make this like interesting for them so that they see the why behind their learning and the purpose? So I love that. So given that you are, naturally organized and have been at this homeschooling thing for a decade, that's awesome. What would you say to someone who was feeling really overwhelmed and unorganized in their homeschool? So they're currently homeschooling. They're just like, I am all over the place and this is chaos in my brain, maybe physically in my space, like whatever the disorganization is that they're feeling, but they're just overwhelmed with the disorganization. What would you say to them? And like give us, a real example of some of what you do to like back up that advice that you give them.
Oh, Erica, that's a tough one because, I try to go live very often to help folks. And I do get that question a couple times where people are like, I'm overwhelmed. What do I do? And what I try to tell people, but I know they don't listen to me because I wouldn't have listened to me either. I try to just tell them to focus on, one thing at a time, like first things first. But when you first read your homeschool laws, you've got this 5-year-old, 6-year-old that you're about to start homeschooling. A lot of folks really think we've got to start with 5 subjects. The law says in Georgia, I'll use Georgia as an example, we've got reading, writing, math, science, social studies. You've got to do those 5 subjects. And so people really feel like I've got to hit the ground running. I've got to start with 5 subjects. And what I want so badly for people to know is when you are just getting started with something, it's okay to just start with one thing, one subject. Yes, the law wants you to do all those things over the course of a year, but people, for the most part, don't hear that do it over the course of a year part. They hear do it now, do it all at once, and if you don't, you're a failure. And I want people to know you can start with one subject. You can start with one schedule, one kid. You don't have to do everything all at once. You know what I mean? And I think that would help a lot of people feel less overwhelmed because, a lot of us, we're at home, we're doing our laundry, our dishes, our bills. We're, sometimes also wives, mothers, friends. We're trying to compartmentalize all these parts of ourselves. And now also we're trying to slice ourselves into an even thinner piece for like being a teacher as well as for our kids. And it's like, I want people to know you can start with one subject. You can start with one block of time in the day, whether it's 30 minutes, whatever you can start with, and then gradually make those changes. But people don't want to hear gradually, eventually, start small. They want all the answers all up front and they want it like really packaged all together. And even when I have in the past given my plan and shown what we do, then I'll get well, that doesn't work for us. And I'm like, I know, because you got to figure it out for yourself, doing it one little piece at a time. But it's so hard to slow down when we've been in such a hustle culture for the last 20 odd years. Or, those of us who went through public school, I know you were a teacher, you're a principal, maybe you also went to public school, where the mindset isn't go slow down. It's okay. Like living slowly in 2025 is almost like an act of rebellion. It's almost like, being countercultural to go slowly, which is so funny when I hear things like slow living or, that sort of thing on the internet. But that really is what it takes to start something new and be successful at it. I did not do this, by the way. I absolutely was trying to model our homeschool off of a British boarding school. And so, of course, I thought my kids needed math, science, history, reading, language arts, Mandarin, and Latin. at the age of 5 because duh, we're going to be impressive people over here. Like Harvard is waiting on us to just show up. And there was so many tears, so much frustration, so much just anxiety, stress. It was horrible. And I feel like I always get a little emotional about this because I feel like I robbed my oldest, my now 15-year-old, of like about a year and a half, 2 years of enjoyment in those early elementary school years because I was so intense all the time trying to force her as a round peg into this square hole. I was miserable, and so was she. But then finally, I don't know what it was, maybe a show, a book, I don't know. Probably going to the homeschool convention actually probably is what really made it click for me. Like, hey, wait, we've got time. Nobody is ever going to look at her and say, hey, what'd you do in second grade? What'd you do in third grade? But her love of learning, these are the years that I have to take advantage of and not be just, crushing her soul because we're not doing Latin right now. So that is really what made it, seeing her in tears over subtraction actually is a moment that always stands out to me of like, I am not doing this right. And so that's really what made me take a step back and say, we're just going to do one thing today, and so I had a schedule for a while where we did one subject per day, where it was like math on Mondays, reading on Tuesdays, science on Wednesdays, social studies on Thursdays, and English language arts on Fridays or something like that. And that's what made me say, okay, this was better. Being able to, because Georgia requires 5 subjects. We were homeschooling for 5 days a week. We'll break it down one subject per day. So I try to give folks the truth about that with me, with the British boarding school example. I mean, down to I designed a crest, Erica, okay? Like I designed a crest for our homeschool that I was going to have embroidered on some little blazers. That's the level of insane and intensity I was on. And I do not recommend that. It was the worst. I would much rather have gone slower. And I did do that with my son. He came along after we had been homeschooling for a couple of years. And by the time he was ready for kindergarten, it was a much more enjoyable experience because I had finally learned, like, you know what, he doesn't need Latin right now in kindergarten. He doesn't need to do algebraic expressions. We have time to get there. So yeah, that would be my piece of advice, is just like to take it slow and figure out who you are, figure out your style, your kid's style, and build it incrementally. And I promise, especially if you've got elementary school age kids, you have time to get into a rhythm, to get into a flow. And even if you've got middle school kids, you have time to get into a rhythm, to get into a flow by taking things, piece by piece. So now that my kids are older and they are all using an online platform for their core curriculum, that really takes care of both the scheduling and the grading. There are some components of Monarch and Time for Learning and Me Academy that I do step into grade. And by the way, those are the 3 platforms that my kids are using. Monarch for my son in 4th grade, Me Academy for my daughter in 8th grade, and Time for Learning for my oldest in 10th grade. So the scheduling is pretty much done for me in each of those platforms. Like I can go in and decide when our breaks are, but as far as planning out one subject a day, no, we're not doing that anymore. They are now each doing all their subjects every day, but it's kind of like shuffled to fit the number of days that I have allotted for their school year. I hope that makes sense. So when you get on the platforms of each of these, you go in and you select your breaks, and then it says, great, we're going to kind of shuffle the deck and put these courses, we're going to align everything so that this course is completed in the time that I've allotted. And so each of my kids is doing at least 4, sometimes more subjects per day, but in smaller increments of lessons so that it gets completed over the course of a year. Now, I feel like for this next part of the answer, I need to say listener discretion is advised, because remember I said I'm a very organized person. I'm not normal when it comes to my level of planning. I have had their transcripts done for high school before they were in high school, before my oldest was even in high school. Matter of fact, I made a video about it on TikTok maybe 3 years ago, talking about how I plan and organize and do our record keeping. And at that point, I had already had the high school transcript complete it. And I ended up putting it up on Etsy and Teachers Pay Teachers for sale because people were wanting to see it and they wanted to use it. And up to now, it's been sold like hundreds of times. So I know that it's working. It's been crowd tested for me. But yeah, I definitely have the transcript like done, ready, and it's the one that I currently use. I don't know if I said earlier, but I used to work in college admissions, and so I know what it takes. I know what needs to be seen. I know what needs to be on a transcript. And so I just developed that and definitely ready to go on that one. And then I've even gone so far as to go ahead and get registered with the Common App because my kids do want to go to college. There's a homeschool component that you have to be prepared to fill in for your kid as the homeschool administrator. So when I tell you I'm probably beyond prepared what I need to be, but that's just how my brain works. I would rather be ready. Like, what's the saying? Like, you stay ready so you don't have to get ready. Like, that's kind of my thought process, because if my kids want to go to college, I don't want them waiting on me to figure out what I need to do for them to help get them there. I want to just be ready. And if they're wanting to go to college, then I can just push the button and be like, yep, I got you. I'm ready. I'm, ready to assist you. So they're not waiting on me to help them get through that process. But I also want to go back to a point that you mentioned, like you used kind of the perfect word with when you said unlearning a lot of things when you get into homeschooling, because I kind of think of homeschooling as like when you visit another country, and it's like, that country, you think that country because you've heard about it, you've seen it on the news, you've maybe seen it on National Geographic or something, but then when you actually visit that country, you realize like, oh, that they didn't tell me about this, or I wasn't prepared for that. And it is a whole other world. And even people who have visited the same country can have vastly different experiences. And that's kind of how I feel about homeschooling. It's like when you get into it, you think you know it because, oh, you've seen it, you've heard people talk about it. So you're like, you think you have a general idea of what to expect, but then you get into this world and you're like, whoa, wait a minute. There was a lot here that I didn't expect. And the way that your family experiences it is going to be entirely different than the way the family across town experiences it. And both are correct and valid and accurate depictions of their experience. So it's a wild ride, but I will say, for me personally, once I let go of the ego part of it, because I'll be honest, a lot of the things I was planning for my children to do was to sound impressive to other people, including family members, friends, random strangers who would possibly ask about homeschooling. I wanted what we were doing to sound impressive to them. So that's why I was adding it onto our schedule. It took me a while to kind of admit that and let that part go of like, I don't need to, run my kids through the ringer so that I can sound impressive at the park or at church or wherever to people who are just casually, in passing interested in homeschooling. Like, why am I going to torture my kids with things that aren't even within their interest just so that I can feel that ego boost when someone asks, so how's homeschool going? And I can say, oh, they're doing Latin, they're doing Mandarin, da 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 da. Like, no, that's not what my kids' childhood, that's not what I want for them. And I do think more than just me probably feels this way, but I'll be the one to admit it. I'll own it that I did this. And it does take some courage, I think, to just say, no, I'm just going to focus on what's best for my kid at this point in their life. And if that doesn't sound impressive to someone else, so be it. Who cares? But I'm not going to continue to, like I said, put my kids through this gauntlet so that someone else doesn't think that what they have experienced in homeschooling isn't good enough. I don't want to do that anymore. But that's what, when you said about unlearning things, that's what that made me think of. That's what that reminded me of.
Okay, this is so helpful. I am curious to know why you chose to go with all online learning, and if there's any like pros and cons that you are feeling this way, or pros and cons to using these. I am assuming that you did not use all online learning since starting homeschooling, so I'm curious about that. Definitely, can you drop a link to your transcript document for sale? Did you have all the courses on the transcript of like 3 years prior? I'm just so intrigued by this, like that you had it done before they were even in high school. Your oldest was even in high school. So was it like the transcript with the courses already outlined? Which honestly, I don't know why I'm intrigued by this or even shocked. Not to say that that's not a huge feat that you took on, but I'm saying it because like I'm a former educator. I understand backwards planning, and that's essentially what you did, and that's what I teach like in my free checklist that I have about planning is about backwards planning. Like you need to start with the end in mind. So if at the end of high school they need to accomplish this transcript, well, like having it laid out first then allows you to say, okay, so year one, this is what we're doing. Month one, this is what you need to do. Like you backwards plan from your ending. Okay, this is so helpful. I am curious to know why you chose to go with all online learning and if there's any like pros and cons that you are feeling this way or pros and cons to using these. I am assuming that you did not use all online learning since starting homeschooling. So I'm curious about that. Definitely, can you drop a link to your transcript, document for sale? Did you have all the courses on the transcript of like 3 years prior? I'm just so intrigued by this, like that you had it done, before they were even in high school. Your oldest was even in high school. So was it like the transcript with the courses already outlined? Which honestly, I don't know why I'm intrigued by this or even shocked. Not to say that's not a huge feat that you took on, but I'm saying it because like I'm a former educator. I understand backwards planning, and that's essentially what you did, and that's what I teach like in my free checklist that I have about planning is about backwards planning. Like you need to start with the end in mind. So if at the end of high school they need to accomplish this transcript, well, like having it laid out first then allows you to say, okay, so year one, this is what we're doing. Month one, this is what you need to do. Like you backwards plan from your ending. So yeah, that's like so smart. And please drop the link so I can share it in the show notes so everyone who doesn't have it, myself included, can grab that. And you mentioned like registering for the Common app, I think you said. Can you drop the link to that? And then last, I feel like I've requested stuff from you in this conversation. I'm like, can you make a social media post on this? Can you do? But you're just so knowledgeable. And my next request is you should definitely teach a course, not a course, a workshop on like preparing. Like you can call it Stay Ready so you don't have to get ready, preparing your homeschool for high school. Like that's the name. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, I like that name, but obviously you can name it. And obviously you don't even have to teach this workshop, but like I would love to join how you got ready for high school 3 years before high school. Okay, I love the analogy of visiting another country. So smart. And then like somebody needed to hear what you shared about not letting other people's opinion influence how you do your homeschool and not trying to do homeschool to impress other people. Somebody definitely needed to hear that. And I am one of those people. And also like it's a good reminder. I feel like I need to like pin this voice note so I can just listen to it once a week because such a good reminder. The one thing you said when you were talking about that is like you weren't going to let someone else impact you doing what you knew was best for your children. And so it's probably second nature to you at this point. But if you can like think back, and maybe not, maybe there's some moments where you still have this like moment in time where you're like, what is best? Like, how do you determine what's best for your children? I know you have a background in college admissions, so you have that experience of like what's best to get them into college. What do I need to do for that? But just in general, like, were there specific resources that you use to figure out what's best? Do you have mentors? Like, how do you like determine that? Especially for people who are maybe scared to start. I know you a lot talk about helping people who are nervous to start homeschooling. And one of the things I've heard people be nervous about is like, what if I can't give them a good education? Like, how do I know what's going to be best for them? So I would love to know if there's any specific strategies and ways in which you determine what's best for your children at any given time.
I will definitely get those links to you for the transcript and the Common app, the section that talks about homeschooling. But just want to make a quick note. Basically, for if anyone doesn't go to the link, just remember when it comes to the Common App, it's the application that most colleges now accept when it comes time for, freshman admissions. And when you are a homeschooler, as a parent, you're acting in the role of counselor. So you go in and make your own like counselor account so that when your child is filling out their application, they invite you as their counselor to put in the information that a counselor would typically put in. So very simple, very easy to do. And I think there's lots of different articles about it, like walking through the process, because, we're not the first ones to do this homeschool thing. As much as it feels very lonely and isolating when you are the first person to homeschool, then it can feel like, oh my gosh, I don't have any answers. I've got to, create all the answers myself. It's like, no, you really don't. And you asked if I've had mentors along the way. I absolutely have. There are homeschool friends of mine whose children have gone on and graduated and have gone on to college, gone on to do great things. And so those are the people that I would look to and ask questions to when I was getting started, 10 years ago. So mentors have definitely been a part of my life, but also I'm always in research mode. And it's not even just about homeschooling. Like, I'm the type of person that if there's a conspiracy theory out there, I'm researching it. If there's something that I want to know, I'm going to research it. That's how I pass the time. And so when it comes to, how do I know what path to choose for my kids? Like, really all states have high school requirements. So especially the high school is the easy part. It's the one that has the roadmap most laid out for us. Georgia tells us specifically that high schoolers need 4 maths, 4 sciences, 4 social sciences, this many foreign languages, and then, this many electives, and all for it to add up to, 23, 24 credits by the end of their high school career. So it's already planned out. It's not me deciding this or me creating this. It's already planned out. The only thing my kids get to pick are their electives, which of course there are many of those, but it's really not that. It's already out there. The template is already out there. Now, when it comes to middle school and elementary school, that's where you can really be more flexible. But again, you're following a core curriculum with a few electives sprinkled in. There are no consistent middle school requirements. There's not like a certain number of credits a middle schooler has to have or an elementary school student has to have. But in general, that they're going to have some reading, some writing, some math, some history, some science, excuse me, and some art, some music, maybe throw in some computer science, some coding, some typing, like all the typical things. And then obviously you want to leave room for their interest, for their special interest. So if you've got a kid who's like really into bugs, get a little entomology going on when you have that science, do that emphasis. Or if you've got a kid that's really, really musically gifted, then you definitely want to add in more music where you can. And that's where unit studies are fabulous, because you can have these themed studies that are centered around your child's interest, but it's still ticking the boxes on all the the typical milestones and standards that a child would need to meet. And another resource that I'm always referencing is, here in Georgia we have a website that is it's given to us by the Department of Education, and it's called Inspire. The website is inspire.gadoe.org, and on there is basically like a course map for every subject, for every grade, from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade. And so I use that a lot as kind of like a guideline. I use that for inspiration when I'm looking for a particular curriculum, because I'm, looking to make sure that the curriculum I'm choosing has all the same points that are required for that particular course, so that I can make sure, like, okay, we're at least doing this minimum standard from the Department of Education. And then once we've done that, we can go on and expound upon what my kids are interested in and do more in certain areas. So that's my guideline. And then I'll also check in with my mentors and be like, did y'all do something like this? Or is this, are we going to be on the right track if we do it this way? And they're like, yeah, no, they provide that guidance. So, and I think we all need that, by the way. It's always nice to have a homeschool friend that's like a couple years ahead of you so that you can say like, hey, am I on the right track? Am I going the right way? And they're like, yeah, no, you're doing great. Or they'll be like, you might want to, turn left at that next at that next stoplight, just to make sure that you are on the path that you want to be on. So I think it's also important to make sure like the mentors, the friends that you're seeking out are in line with your goal, your vision, your kids' goals. Because I mean, we all know there's different types of homeschoolers out there. So I wouldn't have a mentor, for example. I would not select someone to be my mentor who's an unschooler, because that's not the path I'm on. And the advice that they give me isn't going to lead to the destination that I'm trying to go necessarily. So I think that is important to, try to find people that are on the same path as you, kind of have the same values that you have, because I do think that can derail you if you guys are, not aligned in that regard. And listen, as far as a workshop, I don't know. It's something I have thought about, like especially like a pre-recorded one. I don't know. I like the lives that I do. I consider those to be the workshops, and then people can just ask the questions they want to ask, and I can answer them in the moment in real time. And I used to post them, post recordings of the live in podcast form. So I, had a podcast years ago, like, I don't know, a couple years ago, called Homeschool Help Desk Live. And it was something that I just, like I said, I would record all the different conversations we were having. So, I mean, it's still out there. And then I wrote a little Amazon book that is called Homeschool Help Desk Guide. And I put some of the answers to the more frequently asked questions in that. So I have done something similar. I don't know. My problem, and my cousin will probably, she continues to tell me I'm crazy. I have a problem charging people for things that I feel like should just be like common knowledge information. I don't know. I need to get over that, I know. But yeah, I mean, it's out there. I've done something similar, but you're right. Maybe I should do something more concentrated on specifically high school, since I am at that point. And I know that's a point that a lot of people have questions about. So I don't know. I'll keep thinking about it. But I appreciate the encouragement.
Okay, thank you for that clarification, because if I had the question, I'm sure other people do, or misconceptions about the transcripts. And yes, I'm throwing other people under the bus with me. I'm not the only one. I've never had high school experience. I've only had K through 8 experience, and it didn't even occur to me, like, duh, they tell you, the high schools tell you what the requirements are. And even I'm sure colleges have it posted of like, this is what your transcripts need to be to get accepted. It's also been a long time since I applied to college. So now as you're describing the Common App, I was like, oh yes, I'm pretty sure I did that many years ago. So anyways, thank you for that clarification, and so many good pieces of advice around the community and mentorship, and like 100% finding the mentors that align with you. It's really funny to me because, I'm just starting my homeschool journey, finishing the first year. And so I've been like seeking people out a little bit and like really talking to them and asking them questions about their homeschool. And I like make mental notes, and I'm like, okay, that's not quite what I'm going for right now. So like, respect and love what you're doing for your children, but I won't, text you or call you when I have a question. I like kind of just follow that way. And we're still friends. Our kids still play, right? But I'm not really talking details of homeschool with them. So totally makes sense. These are my last 2 questions for you. And then we're coming up on the book question. So hopefully and obviously if you have more than 3, let us know all of them. But I think it's kind of fun to be like, what are your top 3 today? So my last question is around this community. How did you find the mentors that you have? How did you find them? And then can you talk a little bit about your children's community, their friends? There's, socialization is always a big thing. And how did you find community for your kids too? And it may be the same answer for both you and your kids, but let's talk about that. Then we'll go into the books, and then we'll close out.
Okay, so it's so interesting now that I'm thinking back to the 3 women who I consider my mentors. I actually met them, one at the park, one at the library, our local library, and one online, actually. So, and then we ended up meeting once we were online, talking for a bit. We met up in real life, and it's like, yep, we're in this thing together, girl. So that's where I met them. When we first started homeschooling, I was addicted to always using homeschool in my searches for everything. So if I was looking for a park day, I had to put homeschool park day. Or if I was looking for a resource, I would put, homeschool math, homeschool everything, homeschool, homeschool, homeschool. And so we went to a lot of homeschool themed events, and that is where I met a lot of homeschoolers. I also have met people at homeschool conventions, and just my whole world was just homeschool, homeschool, homeschool. And that worked for me to find people to engage with as other homeschooling parents. With my kids, though, their networks were developed when I stopped using homeschool in every search and just started looking for events that were around their themed interests. So, for example, my son plays sports. My middle daughter does Girl Scouts and archery. My oldest is into Dungeons and Dragons and just going to the library and art. So she does an art club at one of the local universities around here. Has nothing to do with homeschool, by the way. So the kids that are at these things that I just mentioned for my kids, maybe there's a homeschool kid there, maybe there isn't, but more often than not, it's a mix of kids. So you've got a mix of educational backgrounds, which, by the way, never comes up in conversation with kids. Okay, when kids get together, they're not asking, so what school do you go to? That's a parent question. Kids do not care. The last thing kids want to talk about, whether they are homeschooled or not, is school. Like, all kids, especially as they get older, like, that's just not what they're talking about. They're talking about shows, movies, games, interest, like personal interest. They do not care where their friends go to school. They just want to know, hey, can we, text later? Or are you going to be at the park on this day? Can we meet up at this event? Like, that's what kids care about. And I think as parents and as adults, we always think we have to do everything in line with their education. Like, if your kid goes to public school, then they've got to have public school friends. Well, your kids are allowed to have friends that don't go to their same school. Same thing with homeschoolers. If you've got homeschool kids, all your kids' friends don't have to be public or homeschooled. So their networks came from their interest. And like, just recently, they were in a drama camp, my older two girls, and they met a girl that they really liked. When I got together with her mom, we ended up going out to eat after the last day of drama camp, had a great time. They did this nice Father's Day craft together, and it was just a whole experience that just happened organically. And that girl that they met, she goes to private school, but they met at drama camp. So all that to say, I made my friends in my homeschool mentors at homeschool themed stuff. My kids' friends have come from all their many different interests. And they've had friends come and go, just like you grow up and you grow apart from people, or people move or what have you. It's just like the natural order of friendships, and then they make new friends. And like, my oldest is getting ready to start swim, so I'm sure she'll meet some folks at swim. So it's just they meet people organically just based off their interest. I'm so nervous about the book question, but like, I do have some books in mind. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're doing a fiction, a nonfiction, and a homeschool book, right? Okay, I got you. So my current fiction book obsession, I feel like it's an appropriate word, has been The Screw Tape Letters by C.S. Lewis. I cannot stop reading that particular book. So I came across it at my job, working at homeschool consignment. People kept asking if we had this book in stock. And I'm like, that's a funny title. Like, what's that about? And so one day I look it up and I'm like, okay, that sounds intriguing. But I'm not, I wasn't ready to commit to anything, and it was not available through the Libby app. So I put it on hold for an audiobook. Eventually I got it, listened to it, and I feel like by the time I got to letter 3, I was like, oh my gosh, what? And by the time I finished the book, I was like, no, I need to order this. I need to hold it in my hands and read these words. So I actually ended up ordering the book. I'm reading it. I've been reading it for like the last 2 weeks straight. So that is my recommendation right now for fiction. For nonfiction, I really go back to The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People a lot. I find myself quoting it a lot, and I like the teens version as well for my teens. So I guess that's technically two books, but in the same theme of Seven Habits of Highly Effective People has been a book that I have referenced for like 25 years in terms of, the path that I'm taking in life. So I do recommend that book, and that's something that I think should just be on every family's shelf. It's something that like I said, I constantly go back and think about it, like all the different tips, beginning with the end in mind. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. Like all those types of things, they keep resonating with me the older that I get. And then with regards to a homeschool book, it's actually a series. I wouldn't be being authentically me if I did not say that I have an obsession with the Workman Publishing Big Fat Notebook series, which go through middle school and high school. I love them so much. I have referenced them often. No matter what curriculum we're using, those books continue to be like the reference books that I tell my kids, hey, if you are, not understanding something with your schoolwork or you have a question, go get that book off the shelf, find the chapter that it's in to help you explain this concept more thoroughly. Love that series. They look so good on the shelf. They feel good in the hand. And I mean, me and Workman Publishing are basically besties now because I just really love that series so much and I'm always recommending it. So technically not one book, but it is a series. And I think every homeschooler would benefit from having those books on the shelf. So those are my recommendations in those three categories.
Okay, I love how you found your mentors and how your kids find their friends and community because, like, it's so obvious and so simple. And it's so funny because the first homeschooling mom I met that right before we started homeschooling was actually from camp. So my son was in summer camp, and when you do camp drop off, you like say hello to the parents who are dropping off at the same time or picking up at the same time. And this, I said hello to this mom in passing, and then I went to Starbucks afterwards, and she was in Starbucks. I was like, we saw each other at camp. Hi, I'm Erica, and we're still friends. So she literally is just like the other day, her and her kids rode bikes, her and our kids rode bikes together for a few minutes because we live right near our neighborhood park. So she was in the area. But yeah, anyways, that is so real. Like, I have realized I put this in my homeschool starter kit. It's like you just have to put yourself out there and you have to introduce yourself. Like, just say hello, especially if you're at the park or at the library during typical school hours. If there are other kids at the park or at the library, they're probably homeschoolers, and those parents homeschool their kids, right? So like you just have to, if you're introverted, be a little extra and just say hi. So thank you for sharing that. And thank you for the book recommendations. I am definitely adding those to my Goodreads. I've read the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, but it's been a while. So I'm doing the 75 Hard Challenge right now, and I have to read 10 pages of fiction book every day. So that just might be my next one to go back and read again. So I appreciate that little plug, and I'm definitely gonna look into the other two. So thank you for sharing. I hope it wasn't too much pressure, but we appreciate you. Okay, so last things, final pieces of advice or words of encouragement. Anything you'd say, like what do you typically say to a nervous, overwhelmed, excited homeschooler or new to homeschooler? Like, last piece of advice. And then please tell us all the things that you haven't mentioned yet in terms of if you have anything going on that you want folks to know about and check out, or where they should, find you and reach out to you.
Erica, you hit the nail on the head exactly. I think the longer people homeschool, the more they realize how it is such an organic extension of what you're already doing. Like it's an extension of your parenting. It's an extension of just getting out there, getting to know your community and realizing just all the things that are available, which you will learn through word of mouth, your own research, and just being in this bubble, this realm, So, but of course, anytime someone starts something brand new, whether it's moving to a new city, starting a new job, going to a new school, whatever the new thing is, it's always extremely nerve-wracking. So I try to encourage people by just letting them know, like, that's the correct feeling. That is accurate. You're going to feel unsure, shy, nervous, all the things because you're the new kid on the block. But the longer you're in it, the more you will become comfortable And pretty soon you'll be the one that's giving someone else a helping hand and an encouraging hug or, text to let them know like that they're okay. What I try to always just tell new folks whenever I meet them is homeschooling is like your family. It's going to look like your family. So don't get discouraged when your homeschooling doesn't look like someone else's family because that's a different family. We all have our different, idiosyncrasies that we like to do, our different things that make us unique. So don't get caught up in comparison. And it's okay to be a little uncomfortable and try things out and not like them and want to move on to something else. You don't have to marry the first curriculum you buy. In fact, most of us do not. So I just try to be encouraging in that way. And I just really also want to say thank you so much for starting this. And I'm so looking forward to listening. I love this concept. I love this idea. And I appreciate you allowing me to even be a part of it. And I've had so much fun, and I've so looked forward to these voice notes. I'm going to miss this because we've been doing this over a couple days. Like, I'm really going to miss looking forward to the next note from you. So this was so fun, and I love this concept. I love what you've done. As far as me, I am on social media at Cousin Tam on just about all platforms, primarily Instagram and TikTok, but we'll see how things go in the future, I guess. And then I don't really have any special projects or anything coming up, but you never know with me because I'm always into something at some point. So I would say just the best thing is just keep it in touch on social media, which is again at Cousin Tam. And again, love this concept, love this idea, and I cannot wait to hear more from you.
Look, we don't have to stop the conversation. We can keep the voice notes going. I'm open to that. But actually, for real, like, we will stop the public recordings now, but feel free. This thread is open. So I'm totally open to continue chatting and reaching out, as we need to. And I'm so, so grateful for everything you shared. I know that I have learned a lot. I had already been learning a lot from you on social media, but I'm so grateful to be able to have chatted one-on-one and now share that so folks can even learn even more from you. I'm sure most people are already following you, but if they're not, they better go follow you and stay in touch because like you said, you never know what you might have coming up. So I'm so grateful. Thank you. Thank you so, so much. And yeah, thanks so much for being on the podcast. Bye.